Lurch is a rapper that is primarily known for the brutal murder and cannibalization of Tynesha Sias. The details of the incident are very disturbing and brutal, but there's much more to this story than what meets the eye. There are a lot of inconsistencies in the case and a lot of plausible theories that make
I watched that muff. Oh my god. Who was the sick ass nigga that recommended me to watch that shit?
Big Lurch is a rapper that is primarily known for the brutal, disturbing, and brutal, but plausible theories that make it seem like Big Lurch may have been set up. So today we're going to be looking into the darkest murder in rap history. I know this has been covered a few times already, but I figured I'd look into it myself, especially since you guys seem to be liking the darker videos recently. Also, a lot of these
Dark
other videos,
videos are
although
just
they're
some
very good, do not
W
cover as
videos.
much of his early career as I wish they had, because it is pretty important to the story. And with this case being so popular, it really does overshadow his early career, making it a little bit more difficult to find information. But I did my best to piece it all together, so let's hop into it. So Big Lurch, also known as Antron Singleton, was a promising rapper who began his career in the 80s. He got his stage name from a friend, as he is 6'6". He was rapping in Texas when popular Bay Area
Nigga is
rappers such as Mac Dre
6'6".
helped.
Bro, big niggas, like tall niggas cannot be real, bro. I met a nigga who's 6'9", bro. Like, how are you that tall? Like, you cannot be real. That nigga was like a foot and 3 inches taller than me. You guys are not real people. I will not accept that tall niggas exist. No more.
Helped him develop his
Like,
early
if you're taller than 6'2", you do not exist.
career. He moved out to the Bay Area to work on music with them. One of the most notable artists he worked with from this area was E40. Throughout the 90s, he was working on music and performing, and he actually had a really unique voice and sound, and it was very promising. Being in these Bay Area studios, he met Dooney Baby and Rick Rock, who he eventually formed the group with called Cosmic Slop Shop. Although he did
Okay.
say that the plan was never to make a group, they just ended up making so many songs together that it happened, and they actually signed to a label in 1996 called MCA Records. They released one album in 1998, and it didn't do too well, so they broke up the following year. In 1999, he released the mixtape 3XL. The following year, Lurch had a lot of hardship with his grandma dying and him getting in a nearly fatal car accident where he was briefly paralyzed. Many people think that Lurch was using PCP to cope with the pain, but he said in his interview with Vlad TV that the first night he smoked PCP was the night of the crime, although I've also heard people say online that he said otherwise, so it's kind of a gray area. He said that after his accident, labels were approaching him saying that they could help him bounce
Yo,
back.
what the
So
fuck
because
is
of this, he signed to a
PCP?
label called Black Market Records. And as we all know, labels can be pretty sneaky. One day he went to the studio to link with all the people from the label, and for some reason there was a lot of hostility towards Lurch. Apparently a lot of the people from the label were Crips, including Milton Grimes, who apparently was the owner of the label, and Lurch says that he was a Blood. He says that when they signed him, they knew he was a Blood and were acting normal, but when he got to the studio, they were acting completely different and very weird. Because of these tensions, he ended up moving back to Texas for a while, and he said he needed money to work on his album that he owed them, so he began selling dope. Because of this, he caught a case and got locked up, and the label actually helped him get a lawyer and helped him get out of jail. Because of this, he said he would honor his word and make sure to finish up his album for the label, so he moved back out to LA. It's also important to note that at the time his music
Like, okay, we gonna have to rewatch this one more time because he's giving too much information too fucking quickly. Hold on.
began getting a lot darker, kind of dipping into the horrorcore genre. If you don't know what
Horrorcore is
horrorcore is, it's
fire.
basically a type of rap music where you say the darkest, most despicable things possible.
Horrorcore
For
is
example, a lot of
fucking
Eminem's
fire,
very
dog.
darker work could be considered horrorcore. But for some reason, when he got back to LA, the tension was still there with people from the label, so he got more involved with
But
local
why
LA
would you?
gangs.
Why would you like knowing sign of blood when y'all Crips, especially in the 90s, especially in the fucking 90s?
Concerned with him because now the tension is on and everybody bringing their G's around. The politic is out on the streets.
At some point when he moved back to LA, he moved into a dope house, and in 2002 when
Back
he was
in-
working on his
back
album
now,
in LA,
like-
he was having a
Now, okay, you can sign a blood with like all Crip members. You feel me? It's no big issue unless like you guys are actually beefing. But like in the 90s, it was like Bloods versus Crips, and then there was infighting with the gangs. You feel me? So that shit,
party at his apartment. He
that
also
shit
lived with
dumb.
another
Like,
gang member who was dating Tynesha at the time, who's the victim from the murder. He said that night people
okay,
were passing around PCP and claims he only smoked weed up until that point, but he tried it that night. Next thing he knows, he wakes up 2 weeks later in an LA County jail cell.
I want to fit in, you know, I don't want to look like a punk. I smoke weed, tobacco. I don't even drink. So I'm like, fuck it, I hit the wet. And
he's
I
just a
wake up,
regular
man,
nigga.
I had been in jail for like 2 weeks.
Tynesha's body was found the next day with multiple injuries and bite marks. This next part's pretty disturbing, so if you don't like gore, maybe click off or mute it for a little bit. But basically, her chest had been open and a piece of...
Neighbors reported hearing thrashing sounds that were followed by an argument and screaming. Yaisa's body was found in the apartment by a friend. Her chest has been torn open and 3-inch blade found broken off, and her shoulder blade teeth marks surrounding her face and lungs, which have been torn off
of her lung
chest.
had been removed.
Okay?
The police found Lurch naked
Nigga,
running through the streets,
nigga
claiming he was
ate her
covered in
shit.
blood. They even said that they
Nigga
found
ate her
pieces of
lungs.
Tynesha in Lurch's stomach. From face value, it looks like Lurch is the one who did it, and I thought this for a while too because, well, there were
They
pieces
probably
of
set
her in his
him up.
stomach. He was found bloody. He was on PCP. It just
Like,
seems like he was the one who did it. And many other people think this too.
he was
because of
signed to
articles,
a
headlines,
blood.
and
No,
YouTube
he was signed
titles.
to a
But when you look
Crip
a little bit
label.
deeper
They
into
probably
it
set
actually
him
looks
up.
like Lurch may have been set up. Milton
They
Grimes, who I
probably
mentioned
set him
earlier,
up.
who was a manager at the label and was also a gang member, was assigned to be Lurch's lawyer. At the time, they were pleading insanity, so Lurch was on psych meds called haloperidol. Mayo Clinic says this medicine may cause people to become dizzy, drowsy, or may cause trouble with thinking or controlling body movements. So Lurch really couldn't speak for himself or defend himself, and he really had no idea what was going on. Milton Grimes' strategy was to admit that Lurch did it and to claim he was insane, and told Lurch he would only get a couple of years and then he would be let free. But the case that Grimes made was actually extremely weak, and here's why. First of all, pleading insanity in California doesn't work when you're a voluntary drug user. It can be used if you have a history of mental illness, which Lurch did, but it was never brought up in trial. Apparently, Lurch was hospitalized 2 times for his bipolar disorder. As for the bite marks, Lurch says that there were dogs in the house, but that was never brought up, and the bite marks were never tested to see if they matched Lurch's teeth. Like I said, they claimed he was covered in blood when they found him, but the pictures don't show that much blood. There were also a lot of bloody handprints and footprints at the scene, but for some reason they weren't used in the case. Lurch also says he was living in a dope house since he was involved with a lot of gangs, and he says that there were tons of guns and drugs in the house, but when the police...
Like I said, they set this nigga up, right? I don't know if he was a rival gang member. I don't know if his lord was a rival gang member, but it was in the 90s. Like shit. If he was a Crip, you know, Lurch is a blood. If he was a Crip, you feel me? Like that's on site beef. You feel me? Now they probably was trying to get rid of him out the label. You feel me? Or they was trying to like find a way to take him out. Like they probably was trying to take him out. Like that's the only two answers.
None of the drugs or guns were there, so it had been cleaned up, making it seem like he may have been set up and this was planned. The victim, Tynesha, was also found with a lot of PCP in her system, and even with her mom saying that she didn't use PCP, there was so much found in her system that it would have been impossible for her to smoke it, so some think that it was actually poured down her throat. They even used some of Lurch's unreleased music in court, which has now just recently become illegal. On top of all this evidence that wasn't used in court, Milton Grimes, his lawyer, was sued for malpractice in 2004 by another client and was ordered to pay $1.2 million. Although Lurch has said that Milton Grimes was a manager at the label, I couldn't find anything online linking him to the label, but if he really was a part of that label and he really was a gang member, that would be a crazy turn of events, and his case would look a lot more in Lurch's favor. Lurch himself said that he believes that Grimes did this because he knew the DA and everyone at the court and wanted to gain favor with another case. So as we can see, there's a ton of inconsistencies with the case, but they don't really prove Lurch's innocence. But one thing that makes the case look a lot more in Lurch's favor is that the victim's mother actually sued the label, claiming that the label provided him with drugs to act out in a violent way. She thinks that the label wanted to market him as a gangster rap artist. She doesn't think Lurch killed Tynesha, and she thinks it was actually her boyfriend who was a gang member and had previously beat her before. Apparently, Tynesha was actually ready to walk out on him right before the incident.
I believe he the one set all this up. He was beating on her. She had all her stuff packed. ready to leave the day all this happened.
She also points out that Tanisha was struck in the back of the head with a scooter that belonged to one of her kids, and there was a bloody handprint on the scooter that did not match Lurch's. And you're probably thinking that, well, all this may be true. What about the pieces of Tanisha that were found in Lurch's stomach? Well, Lurch himself says that they only found a very small portion, and the victim's mother thinks that Lurch was so high he may have mistaken it for a piece of meat, or he may have been tricked by the people that were there. It has also been brought up that the label has done similar things before with an artist named X-Rated, who was on trial for murder. When he was on trial and after he was convicted, Black Market Records put out multiple albums to profit off of this. Regardless of all this, Lurch was sentenced to life in prison.
They were trying to get him done.
Parole. Following the trial,
they were trying to get him
there's been
gone.
Even more shady stuff that's happened. The label put out the album that Lurch had been working on and titled it "It's All Bad." Lurch said that the original name of the album was going to be The Puppet Master, but instead the label put it out however they wanted to. So this just further backs what Tanisha's mother was trying to say about the label trying to market him as some gangster rap artist. And on top of that, they actually photoshopped a picture of Big Lurch holding a platter with a skull on it and used it for the cover art for the album, clearly trying to use his case to market the album. They later released a documentary called Drugs Made Me Do It, again without Lurch's permission.
Behind a biography I did called Drugs.
These labels are scheming. They're wilding. If you are artists and you own your masters, keep it.
Made me do it. I didn't even know that was gonna be the name, but they put it out on some Hollywood shit, and I'm a real life human, so the guards hit the building fucking with me. Drugs made me do it. Ooh, I smoke sherm.
It's very clear that regardless of whether or not the label set him up, they did profit from this incident. Lurch says that he's been studying law and has been wanting to get a retrial in the future. He compares his life in jail to Jesus on the cross because he's just being mocked and made fun of by everyone there. But from what I've seen, Lurch has still maintained a very positive attitude. I found a letter that Lurch sent back to a fan after the fan reached out, and Lurch says, "Thanks for the love and support. There's no big me, little you. There's only our common love for music." And he also says, "With support, hard work, and prayer, anything is possible. I have faith in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ." So it seems like Lurch has been maintaining a very positive attitude, which is really good, especially if he was set up, and hopefully at the very least, someday he can get a fair trial. I'll leave his P.O. box on the screen in case anyone is a fan and would like to send him a letter. After hearing him talk in his interview and reading this letter, it's hard to believe that he's some evil, crazy, psychotic killer, and it makes me have a lot more faith that maybe he was actually set up. But regardless of what happened, it's an extremely sad situation. It's sad that a mother was brutally...
If he appeals it, he's probably gonna win the case, because it's like he was clearly set up.
Killed. It's sad that a label profited off of her death, and it's sad that a man woke up with a life sentence without knowing the reason why. Lurch has been using his experience to, at the very least, try to send a message to the youth that drugs are really bad and to stay away from them, and I think that there's really no better example than this. If you like this video, you might like my video about rap songs that have been used in court, because as I mentioned, Lurch's lyrics were used against him, and California just ruled that it's illegal, so it's a pretty interesting topic. Other than that, though, thank you guys for watching. This has been Matty Balls, and I'll see you guys next. Been used in court because, as I mentioned, Lurch's lyrics were used against him, and
man.